Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. So today we are in... Wait a second, that's not one of my parks. That's Deurklink's park. Well, today we are inside of Mount Deurklink. And Mount Deurklink is one of the parks that is being built by Deurklink, or currently the main park that Deurklink is building on his YouTube channel. And, Deurklink has a really cool style to building. He is pretty well known for his Deurklink's Mega Park project, obviously. And this is kind of like a second version of that, I suppose, where the theme is entirely based around this mountain with a ton of roller coasters and different types of rides that are really well themed, actually. A little bit less focused on realism, I suppose, than my videos are. But still really awesome to check out, and a lot of really cool tricks as well with rides, hacking and stuff like that, which I tend to do a little bit less of. So obviously I was very, very happy when Deurklink asked me to build a dark ride inside of Mount Deurklink. Obviously I couldn't say no to that. So today we're gonna do exactly that. Now, we looked around for a little bit and decided upon a place for this dark ride to be built at. And that's going to be this little section right at the end of the park here. So this is like right in front of the main entrance pretty much. And that's where we're going to be building a dark ride. Now, I already have a theme in mind for this dark ride, but we'll talk a little bit more about that once we actually jump into the time lapse. But yeah, that's exactly what we're going to be doing for today. Very exciting stuff. And by the way, have a happy new year, because as of recording this, it's the 1st of January. And that means that it's now 2021. And that's obviously pretty exciting. So I hope you guys all had a great New Year's Eve. Or if you still have a New Year's Eve coming up later this year, then, I'm sure you're looking forward to that as well. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's actually jump into the time-lapse. Welcome to Mount Deurklink. So, for this ride that we're gonna be building, I figured that, since we're kinda in a snowy biome here in this map, which I'm kinda unfamiliar with, not with snow in general, although I haven't seen snow in quite some time, to be honest, but just building in Rollercoaster Tycoon in a different biome is not something that I've really done before. Usually I try to go the safe route with, something that I'm a bit more familiar with, like grasslands and forests and stuff like that, which tend to be the more easier places to build a theme park, I suppose. But in this case, we're obviously in a very cold biome with a lot of snow and a lot of snow-covered trees and stuff like that, pine trees. So it's a very different type of vegetation and landscape that you see inside of a park like Mount Deurklink's park. Now, that was pretty interesting to kind of get used to. I kind of had to figure out how to do that, but luckily, Deurklink already, found its way around that, so I kind of just looked at the way he did his vegetation to see how I could kind of achieve that same effect, to really make sure that it kind of fits in with everything that's already there. Now, we're building a bit of a mountain here, and that's obviously just to hide the show building. Normally, in my own parks, I might expose the show building just a little bit more, because, I try to keep in mind budget restraints and that sort of stuff. But that's not really the type of park that Deurklink here has over here. So instead, we're pretty unconstrained in terms of the budget, pretty much. So we can use all the tricks in the book to hide our show buildings and try to make it look as if there is no show building, which is ideally what you want to try and achieve, I suppose. So yeah, that's gonna be the space like behind there where this entire dark ride is gonna be taking place. And now about the idea for this dark ride, like I said, we're in a snowy biome, so I couldn't help but think of Christmas. And when I think of Christmas, I think of Santa Claus. And when I think of Santa Claus, I always think of Santa's workshop, basically, where all the elves are creating the toys for all the children. And then Santa Claus obviously goes around on the sleigh to bring all the toys to all the kids around the world. And that's kind of what I wanted to, show with this dark ride. Which, it's no longer Christmas, but, it's still a little bit of the holiday season, even though now that it is January, I guess it's pretty much over. But, I still really quite like it, so I don't mind. You know, we're just gonna build a Christmassy thing in January. Why not? I mean, most people still have their Christmas trees up anyways. So this dark ride, the ride system for this dark ride is gonna be a bus bar dark ride, kind of in the same vein as some of the more classical dark rides that you might find at the Disney parks. So think of stuff like Snow White. That's kind of the type of dark ride that we're going for here in terms of the system, though this will probably be a bit more of an updated version of that system, just to allow for a little bit more control and a little bit more flexibility. So the really cool thing about the bus bar dark rides, the classic bus bar dark rides, is that they can go through super tight corners, basically. It's a pretty weird movement to make around corners. If you've ever been on one of those rides, you'll know what I'm talking about. And I figured that would be perfect for this dark ride, as we kind of, you know, have a combination of some wider corners and some pretty tight corners as well, that we're going to be going through. Now, the very first scene of this dark ride is actually the workshop, the place where all the toys are being made. So I made a little conveyor there at the end of the room, pretty much, where I would expect some of the presents to you know, go over the conveyor belt, just to sort all the toys. You know, make sure that little Billy gets his dino, and that Jack gets his princess costume or whatever. You know, it's always really fun to kind of think of how, you know, such an operation would actually take place. You can use a lot of your fantasy to kind of get around that, and that's really quite fun. And you can see that in some of the media that's out there, like movies and books and stuff like that, that they've really, you know, tried all sorts of ways to kind of explain where the toys come from and how they are made and stuff like that. Really quite fun. So it was really quite fun to actually build that inside of this dark ride as well. Now, obviously in Rollercoaster Tycoon we were a little bit limited in terms of the scenery that we have, so I was kind of struggling with figuring out how I could actually fill up the space. In the end, it's a bit of a random prop fest, pretty much. I hope you guys don't mind that, but, you know, obviously you have a lot of different toys, a lot of different colors, a lot of different shapes, so it kind of has to look chaotic, and I figured the only way to really achieve that is to just, you know, chaotically place a lot of random stuff. And obviously we're limited in terms of the items that we have available to us, so I really just went around all the different themes and kind of picked some interesting looking items from that, and in the end you just end up with something that looks like it could be a lot of toys piled up in one giant workshop place, pretty much. So yeah, that's kind of the way that we're doing this at this point. But at this point I figured that I didn't really wanted to, you know, having to tackle another workshop space with, again, the same issue of having to place random props in order to convey the toy idea. So instead what I decided is that after this scene where we are in the workshop with all the elves working on the toys, I figured that we might actually, you know, take our sleigh up in the sky and actually fly over the houses, much in a similar way to what you might find on the Peter Pan dark rides over at Disney. Most Disney parks have them, I do believe. One of the first scenes basically is you actually flying over a city. Now this is an inverted dark ride system, the Peter Pan's flight ride. And that just makes it perfect for, you know, flying over a scene. So first you're flying over London, and you see all the little cars, you know, driving around on the streets. You see all the rooftops, and it's a really, really beautiful scene, especially if it isn't dark outside yet. That way, you know, your eyes aren't really quite adjusted yet, so, you know, you don't really see the black walls on the edges of the scene. A really cool effect. Probably also the reason why the Peter Pan dark ride is such a popular ride. There's always a huge line for it, obviously. Now, one really interesting thing to keep an eye on, I think, in terms of the theme park industry right now, is Tokyo Disney Sea. Tokyo Disney Sea is building an extension, or at least a new Fantasyland, Fantasy Springs, it's actually called, at Tokyo Disney Sea. And there they are gonna, you know, kind of go back to some of the classic Disney stories and built some what we assume to be really cool rides around that. Now, besides the classic, you also have Frozen, obviously. So there will be a Frozen dark ride there. And also a few Peter Pan rides. Now, this is really cool because there's going to be a new generation of Peter Pan rides. And one specifically is going to be built in a huge show building. And we're not quite sure yet what that is going to be. So it could be anything. There are some rumors that it might be some kind of inverted dark ride with media elements tied into it. It could just be another Soarin' or Flight of Passage. We don't really know yet. But that's something to really keep an eye on. And if you're on Twitter and follow some of the people who live there, you'll get constant updates because the monorail at Tokyo Disney Resort is like going right past the construction site. So you get all the details you want from the construction. Seeing these daily updates with all the photos is really quite amazing. Now at this point you can see that I built a scene where you are actually flying over all the houses inside of this little section, flying around a little tower. I figured that would be a cool idea. The Peter Pan ride does that pretty much as well. And then another thing that I, kind of looked at this point is you actually flying into a window into one of those buildings, presumably to deliver the toys to the child that lives there. This was actually really quite interesting because I had to somehow try to build a really small room. And one of the main things that I might want to get in there is obviously a bed and some other furniture. Now, doing furniture in Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 is really hard. I never really had to do that before, and it's tough because you don't really have items to do that with. There are probably some people who can do that a lot better than me, but I ended up using the cowboy wagon basically as a bed, and I think that kind of works. You kind of just sink it into the floor, and you get this this piece of scenery that kind of resembles a bed. Though you really have to squint your eyes for that. So after this scene, after you've delivered the toys to the kid, you then fly out of the window and enter another building that's on the other side of the street pretty much. And I presume at that point you kind of just go past a few different bedrooms, a few different houses to deliver the presents to the little kids. They're sleeping as it is currently night. And after that, you're not really seeing the scenes anymore because at this point it would have been way too hard to actually make the dollhouse effect work for the other scenes that we might have in here. So instead, I decided to kind of close it off and leave that up to the imagination of the viewer, which is always a pretty powerful tool as well. But we have one more little peek hole that you can look into right at the end of the dark ride, right before you enter the station again. And that's gonna be another factory scene. You'll have a lot of moving parts there. Presumably at that point you're back at Santa's workshop, and perhaps some kind of issue that that became known as you started doing this dark ride has been solved and everything is back to normal. As dark rides usually tend to go. Something's wrong, and it gets fixed, and everything is fine. Happily ever after. It's obviously, not just in theme parks. This is just the general way stories tend to go these days. So yeah, dark rides pretty much follow that same path. Now we have the railroad kind of, running right past the dark ride there, so we're gonna hide that in just a little bit. But for now, first I wanted these vehicles to work a little bit better, because they wouldn't be able to go up slopes, because I'm using the reverser roller coaster vehicles for this, because they are really quite good for like a sleigh type of ride pretty much. But they're an unpowered vehicle, so they require chain lifts to go up and go down with gravity. So instead what I did is they actually consist out of 3 vehicles. A front vehicle that doesn't have any riders, a center vehicle, that's the one that you actually see right now, and the back vehicle, that's just another platform that doesn't really have any riders on it. So I switched the front and the back vehicle out for an invisible race car, which is actually a powered vehicle, and that just means that the vehicles are now just actually driving around on their own, just to kind of solve that issue. Now, since this is Deurklink's park, I figured I would put a little joke in here. This is something that I wouldn't really do ever in my own park, but since, this park has a bit of a different style, I figured it might be kind of fun to add a little bit of story here, where presumably some kind of an employee has accidentally, driven off the edge there. 2020 really was a terrible year for this person, but, just a little bit of fun there. And, just a little bit of story elements every now and then. It's always fun. Something that I don't really do inside of my own parks unless it is for a dark ride or, the entire area as a whole. Now, I was actually allowed to build one more flat ride. Deurklink suggested to me that there were a few flat rides that weren't in the park yet, so I just picked one of those and put it here, kind of tried to fit it into the theme. Obviously, because we have a pretty large space here as well that isn't really filled up yet. So this was a nice way to kind of tie this mini area together, have a few different rides, have some photo spots basically, especially the North Pole there. And now we also have this ride, just kind of complete this area. So yeah, that way, there is plenty to do in this area. I guess the only thing missing inside of this area is some kind of, any kind of stalls really. There are no drink stalls or food stalls. I guess that's a bit of an oversight. In the end, I didn't really have space for it either, so I don't feel too bad about not having them. I'm sure the rest of the park has plenty of them, and if it really is needed, you can just build some inside of the dark ride there, right before the station, I suppose. But yeah, that's really quite alright, I suppose. So yeah, right now it's mostly just gonna be vegetation, some terrain work, just to kind of, complete this area. Make sure that Deurklink doesn't actually have to come back to this area and fill in some of the gaps. Instead, he can just move on to the next area and make it connect to this area. And that way, everything will be able to flow nicely into one area from the next. So yeah, it was really a really fun experience to build this dark ride. A bit out of my comfort zone in terms of the theme, I suppose, but that was really fun. Had a lot of fun doing that as well. And, it's nice to do something different for once. And, I can definitely recommend to try something completely different someday. And that's something that Deurklink told me as well, trying to build in such a different theme that you're not really used to is really quite good for your creativity and can be a little bit challenging sometimes, but overall it's just a very good learning experience, I suppose. Now, here I put a sign with the North Pole. Obviously, North Pole doesn't have that much vegetation, but we'll just roll with it. It's alright. So yeah, the very last thing is just kind of finishing up the station. I decided to keep it very simple, just to not really take the attention away from the rest of the area, pretty much. So yeah, that's kind of the way I solved that. Now, if you aren't subscribed to Deurklink yet, make sure to do. He has a lot of really cool videos, and the next episode of Mount Deurklink will be on his channel, obviously. This was just a one-off video. If you're new to my channel, though, definitely make sure to subscribe if you haven't yet. I have my own really cool mega park that I'm working on. Currently working on a water park for that. It's really quite massive, a bit more realistic, a bit more technical details about rides, I suppose. Infrastructure, that's the sort of stuff that you'll really see here. So if you're into that sort of stuff, definitely make sure to check out my channel if you haven't already. Anyways, that's about it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. And I hope to see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.